Okay, hello students. This next Career Day interview is with Craig Miller. So I am going to jump right in and get started with Craig and allow you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what your career is.
As you pointed out, my name is Craig Miller, and I'm a journalist primarily, and specifically, I'm a writer and editor at this point in my career, and I specialize in science writing. Particularly earth science writing, so covering climate issues, atmospheric science. When I was in California, I was on the earthquake beat, kind of explaining the science behind the earthquakes. And so that's mostly the kind of thing I've covered, although obviously in recent months, I've done a lot of writing about COVID too.
Right. So what steps did you need to take to get to where you are now?
It's been a long and winding road, Kendall. I really started in high school announcing the football games and the basketball games, and so initially I was really a broadcaster more than a journalist, and eventually I got a job as a weekend disc jockey when I was a senior in high school at a small commercial station. I went in the Army, worked in Armed Forces Radio, which is I don't know if your students know this, but the U.S. Maintains a whole network of military radio stations and television stations around the world wherever there are U.S. troop stations. So I worked in that for a while, got out, and then started launched my what became sort of my major career in radio and television news mostly, although I've also produced documentaries along the way.
Wow, that's really awesome. I didn't know that the Army did that, so I'm learning something. That's pretty incredible, and I'm learning more and more about things like that you can kind of get your career started in some place that is maybe not in the traditional sense that we think of. So I know times right now are different. We've talked a little bit about how even your work environment is a little bit different right now given COVID times, but if you could walk us through a typical day in your career.
Well, it's interesting because what I love, and I'm sort of answering two questions at once here, but what I love about this field is that there is no typical day. Truly, every day is different depending on what it is you're working on. You might be, going to work in a newsroom at a radio, television station, newspaper, or other organization, web-based organization like that. Or you might be, these days, most of us, frankly, are working from home, doing our interviews. But, typically the first thing you do is, you look at what projects you're working on. In my case, because I'm at this point in my career, a freelancer, I work for various people, an independent contractor, you might say. So, I look at my, the projects that I'm currently working on. Who do I have to contact? Who hasn't gotten back to me? What interviews do I need to get to record, to transcribe? What research do I need to do in order to fill out the article? And then set about doing that throughout the day. And then at one point, when I'm ready, when I've got my interviews and I've got my research done, the research never really ends. I start writing the article. And then, when I feel good about it, turn it into the editor, for review. And I've also worked a lot in radio too, which is, it's a similar process, except the end product, instead of being a written piece, is a recorded, radio spot. Yeah.
That's so cool. So really, depending on how large the projects are or how long term they are, it must vary year to year how many projects you're completing.
Yeah, if you work in like a typical daily news operation, you may be working on a one-day product cycle. You go to work in the morning, you have an assignment editor who will say, "Here's what you're going to do today. You need to go talk to these people and find out about that, and give me a 1 minute or a minute and a half or 2 minute spot for this newscast," and that's your day.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there's a lot of deadlines involved. We'll talk
Right.
about that. Yeah.
Right. So, and you kind of already shared this, but if there was anything else you wanted to add in terms of what you really love about your job.
Well, what I love about the job is, as I said, I never get tired of doing it. I have no intention to ever retire from it because I can't imagine anything that I would enjoy more. and you get to see there's two other aspects to it I wanted to mention quickly, and one is just the things you get to see and the people you get to meet and talk to that regular people, so to speak, never get to do. Behind the scenes, in places like steel mills, blast furnaces, military operations. I spent a lot of time on helicopters and in places that just aren't generally open to the public, and so I've had a lot of really interesting experiences in that sense. And the other thing is just the satisfaction of, it's a lot like being a contractor. At the end of the day or the end of the work cycle, you have a product, a tangible product that's very satisfying. That you say, I wrote this, I made this. There's so many jobs in which you never really get a sense, of having that sort of tangible outcome. But in this job, you always do. There's always a product at the end that is basically your product. And if you've done it well, you can be proud of it.
Yeah, huge sense of accomplishment with this job. Like you said, if done well, that's great. So what kind of skills would you say are really important to be able to do a job like this well? And whether that's those soft skills, I'm hearing a lot that organization might be in there between you scheduling these interviews, all of those things, but also maybe even those trainable skills that you had to acquire throughout the years. Like, for example, being able to ride on a helicopter, which, that may have required something.
Well, you don't have to fly the helicopter. Just
All right.
But obviously you need to be a communicator. There are some aspects of this that I think are innate. I mean, I think there's a talent component to writing and to producing radio and television material. You either have it or you don't. But I don't think you're limited by that. You do have to be a good communicator. You can't be a shrinking violet. You have to be able to, can't be bashful. You have to be able to approach people who maybe don't want to be approached right then. You have to be willing to kind of make a pest of yourself if they're not getting back to you in order to get the story that you're going after. You need to be a self-starter. You can't be the kind of person who is waiting around for somebody to tell you what to do. Once you have that assignment, it's up to you to figure out how to get it done and turn it in on time. And you have to be flexible because things are ever changing. So you have to be able to pivot, and turn on a dime when suddenly the circumstances change. So those are some of the skills. The rest of it, the technical skills, writing, by the way, I said there's a talent component, but a lot of it is trainable. And all the technical skills are trainable, working with audio software and transcription software and that kind of thing, recording in the field. Those are all things that can be trained.
Right. And probably they change as technology improves. So you're kind of having to constantly be a lifelong learner when it comes to those trainable skills.
They've changed a lot just in the time that I've been in the profession.
Yeah. So what are some challenges that you have found in your job?
The biggest challenge, to be honest with you, is getting to the people you need for the story, getting them to get back to you. That's been particularly difficult lately, with COVID. Nobody's in the office. A lot of people are very difficult to reach. So a major challenge has just been getting to the sources that you think you need for the article. Deadlines are a huge challenge. Depending on the circumstances you're working in, your deadline might be a month away or an hour from now. And you have to be able to cope with that, without, losing your cool, whatever that circumstance is. And you have to be able to take criticism, not only from your editors, and your superiors, but from the public at large, because this is a profession where your end product is being put out there for public consumption. And not everybody's necessarily going to like it. And so you have to be able to deal with that aspect as well.
That makes sense. So what would you say are the salary ranges for a job like this? And understandably, there being likely a very big range.
It's all over the map. Journalists are not notoriously well paid. In fact, there's an old joke that it's like entering the priesthood. You have to take a vow of poverty. You better love the work and get your satisfaction out of the work, because it's not a high paying profession, generally speaking. And that's especially true in recent years, like in the newspaper industry, which has been contracting enormously, and cutting staffs and cutting salaries. And broadcast salaries, I think, are not what they were even when I was, a TV reporter in San Francisco 20 years ago. But if you get, and it's driven by the size of your audience. So a reporter in Albany is going to make probably a fraction of what a reporter in New York or Los Angeles is going to make. If you're lucky enough to get hired to be a network correspondent, ABC, NBC, CBS at the national level, you probably would go in maybe just under $200,000 a year. But there's plumbers who make $200,000 a year. That's not that much money, really.
Right.
So as I say, it's not something you want to get into for the money, because not everybody gets to host the Today Show.
Right. It sounds like you have to have a passion for what you do, and probably the flexibility to bounce around it, wherever it might lead you for you to have success.
That's exactly right. And typically in this industry, moving up means moving on. What you would do traditionally is you would climb the market ladder. Like I went from Rochester to Pittsburgh to San Francisco to national to freelancing, so it's, that's typically how you would advance.
Right. Yeah. Willingness to move around, I think, is important for people to consider as they're thinking about what they want to do.
Right.
And I loved what you said earlier, because I'm thinking about the kids who are going to be watching this. They are in grades 6 through 12. And, we often tell kids to get involved and to join extracurricular activities or take classes that might make sense for their future. So I'm wondering, one of the questions is, were there any classes that you took in high school that pertain to your job now? But it sounds like even the extracurricular involvement that you had really contributed to getting comfortable announcing at various sporting events and things like that. I'm sure that probably put some confidence in you as you headed out into the world where you had to figure out what you wanted to do. So if you could just take the last couple minutes and kind of explain maybe what it is that you did in middle school or high school that contributed to where you are now, whether that be classes or activities.
I think for me, it really started, the seeds were planted in elementary school between 4th and 6th grade, when they had a teacher who was very connected to current events. So we would subscribe to newspapers as a class. She would, like, when the NASA launches would occur, she'd wheel in the television and we'd all get to watch the Gemini or or go back to Mercury in my case, space launches, talk about things like that. But then when I was in high school, I did take a course in journalism. And I think that's probably really where I got hooked. I just, it resonated with me immediately. It felt very satisfying. And I recognized that I was able to write pretty competently at that point. And I think the seed was there. Now, of course, then I went into the Army and I had additional training and the opportunity to hone my craft in a low risk environment, because middle market radio is not a secure environment. It's a revolving door. People get hired and fired all the time for all reasons and no reason. So the service was an opportunity for me to hone my craft, in a secure environment, and then get out with even more confidence. Yeah.
Thank you. We actually offer journalism courses here, and students, I've been interviewed myself, and students write up articles for our high school blog. So good to mention that. I think it's important for kids to kind of get a taste of it before they head out into the real world.
Right. And the media landscape has, of course, changed enormously since I started. Like we were discussing earlier, we live in the age of the podcast and the blog now, which means you don't necessarily have to have a big organization behind you. You could start something on your own, and if it catches on, you're on your way.
Yeah, you just need the fan base.
That's right.
Well, I thank you so much for your time, Craig. It's been a pleasure learning more about your career in broadcast journalism, and we appreciate your time.
You're entirely welcome. I appreciate the opportunity.